Well, church family, as you know, we were scheduled this April right now to have a members meeting. And of course, that's been postponed, and we will be getting back to that just as soon as we can. But one of the items that we had already mentioned that was on the agenda was to vote on a new elder candidate to serve our church. Our search committee presented that just before we sort of took this break. And we wanted to take the chance to follow up on that so we didn't kind of lose sight of that agenda item and what we'll be voting on soon. And so the search committee nominated Brother Mark Hernandez to serve in that role. And normally during this time, we would have him share or preach or pray, just to be in front of the congregation a bit more. And we don't really have that. So we wanted to take the time to just ask you some questions, let the church hear some of what the search committee heard, and maybe get to know you a little bit better. So, Mark, thank you for joining us.
Sure. It's great to be here.
I guess the place to start is to give us some dirt on Reed. No, I'm just kidding. No, we won't. We won't.
I have plenty.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. So, for those that maybe don't know you, haven't met you or Carol, just introduce yourself briefly.
Okay. Sure. I'm Mark Hernandez. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. Went to TCU in Fort Worth, where Carol and I met. We had 2 kids. Reed is obviously the director of students here. Our daughter Jenna, they both went to Liberty, which essentially kind of what brought us here to Lynchburg. They both graduated. They're here working in the area.
Does she? Oh, she still lives here. Okay.
She still lives here as
That's
well.
Right. Okay.
Right? So we lived for 30 years in the D.C. area. So from Texas, Carolina, ended up in Washington, D.C. I spent 30 years working in federal government for CIA, and retired at the end of 2018. Kind of brought me here to Forest, which actually wasn't the first time. I think Reed was part of the church around 2016, 17, right. Maybe 15. Probably back to 2015. So we've been in and out of Forest for a good 4 or 5 years. When we come down to visit, be part of your fellowship, and really felt like there was already a connection here through those years. So that was kind of where I'm from, family, and then in terms of how I became a Christian, I was in high school from a kind of nominally Catholic family, kind of going through a period even of a little bit of agnosticism, maybe atheism, but just kind of in a light way. I wasn't an angry atheist as they often can be. We had a speaker come into the weekly assembly at a public high school, and it was essentially an evangelist told his story about trying to prove the Bible wrong, and it was a fraud. And as he got in to do his research, he was like, no, actually the Bible is what it claims to be, which is the supernatural Word of God. He becomes a Christian. That was just like a light bulb went on. It's like, I've never heard of this, and within a few nights after that, I made a commitment to follow Jesus for the forgiveness of my sins. That was the great message at the heart of all that. So that's how I became a Christian, and took me a while to get into a good church, but once that happened, really trained up in knowing the scriptures and seeing other men who lived out mature Christian walk, and those things were highly important and really got me going in my Christian walk.
Evangelist in a public high school.
Yeah, can you believe that?
That doesn't happen much anymore. I mean, probably not in many places. Yeah. So that's incredible. So you mentioned your previous work. You worked in the CIA. Yep. So, people will kind of hear that. That sounds like a TV show or something. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, so I'm a graphic designer by training and education. So I was hired as a designer in their analytic branch, essentially the analytic division. So you're helping analysts who are, writing about every kind of topic around the world that's a threat to the U.S., from terrorism to crime and narcotics to state actors. What can China do? What can Russia do? And they need graphics to help explain their analytic pieces. Sometimes that's economic charts. Sometimes that's graphics to show a terrorist network. And so those are the kind of things that I produced with a team that worked in graphics, maps, interactive products, web. And after probably 12 years or so, I was named an art director, sort of like the designer of the designers, and served my last 17 years or so as the art director for this group. So that's what you're producing. You produce those things for the president. So a lot of the stuff goes in the Oval Office the next morning, and then they go around Washington to the other agencies, to people around the world who need to know this kind of stuff. So that was the heart of the job.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And did you prepare things that the president would see?
Yeah. You go to bed the night before thinking what I just did, finished working on at 11 p.m. It's going to be in there at 6 in the morning. Wow. So that was Reagan, Bush 1, Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, and so I guess I missed. No, I was with Trump just for the
short time. Wow, that's incredible. Wow, what an experience. Yeah. So that's your sort of professional side, but you've also, a huge part of your life has been serving in the church, the churches you've been. So maybe just share some of the most recent places you've been and how you've served the churches.
Okay, so we spent 25 years in a large church in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, a large church can do a lot of things. They've got a lot of programs. That church reached a tremendous amount of people in the D.C. area. So became an elder there in 2005. Learned a lot about, again, how does church happen when it's really big? Programs and staff. A heart for evangelism, really well established in preaching the word and doing that well. So I learned a lot about church in that sense. Great. And one way I kept thinking, well, is this how all churches are? That's my only sort of experience in measuring stick. And then I became kind of familiar with the 9 Marks philosophy of building healthy churches. And I started to look at, the large church and how well can it carry out this kind of a structure that really builds healthy churches. And I thought, I'm not sure that one's doing it that well. And I think I really became sort of philosophically committed to those 9 Marks and really seeing that in the life of the church. So that kind of led us to another congregation that was smaller, that was not only 9 Marks shape, but it was actually a plant from Mark Dever's church in Capitol Hill. Right. So I think it really excelled at being intentional about pastoring, how the pastor shepherd the congregation. So I learned a lot of really great real life experiences of what it means to be a pastor who's a shepherd, caring for the congregation, having the congregation's maturity as kind of the big picture, right? This is what we're trying to do, mature the congregation, as well as spread the word through the congregation as we share our faith and those type of things. So it's a really that last experience was about five years before we came here, and I think that was a really blessing of equipping that I wouldn't have gotten in the previous context. Again, just because the size of churches are different, kind of the philosophy of how they want to emphasize what's important in ministry. Again, a lot of really good things in the big context, but a lot of things well executed in the small context. So coming to Forest here, I saw so many parallels of this previous church, and feel maybe more equipped for ministry than I have. I guess we all feel that way as we grow in the Lord. But again, really feel like this is a good place to help serve in that way. If the congregation sees it that way as well. So,
certainly. As you look at the New Testament, whether it's the epistles or even those first few chapters of letters in Revelation, it's interesting how there are churches of all different sizes, and different churches have different strengths and different weaknesses, but they're all used by God in the kingdom. Different contexts. There's so many things. And so, there's rarely this just monolithic cookie cutter this is how everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody can learn different things in different communities and so forth. So those experiences can all come to bear, and it's great that you've certainly had that. So, here at Forest, you've already been involved serving with our college ministry. So what that's been like? What have you enjoyed about college students, or maybe challenges or anything related to that?
I mean, I think I really enjoy college students for the season of life that they're in, where so much is focused on the future, like what's sort of the next things on their plate and their horizon, whether it's school, where they're going to work, will they marry, who will they marry, where will they live. So it's part of the ministry was calling it Next. We call ourselves the Next ministry. I think that's a really important time for the church to come alongside and help them lay a foundation. They may have been a Christian since they were 10 years old, but they're coming into adulthood where they're really laying that foundation, in a more intentional way, in a more mature way. And I think it's really vital for the church to be part of helping them, and not only so that they can go to the next semester and the next year and whatever, but it's that life view of there's a next age coming. And again, really, if all Christians live in light of that next age, it's going to help us know how to make decisions, prioritize, how are we going to walk with the Lord, and again, even in a time like this where there's a lot of uncertainty. So that's next age, and then of course, thinking about maybe the next event is the return of Christ. But you put all that together, I think that makes working with the college ministry an excitement and a challenge all at the same time.
Now, college students oftentimes they can be transient, right?
Yeah.
They can be, just they're here one week. Their group of friends changes, and their priorities and hobbies, things they're trying out. And so there may be college students who say, well, I might attend church here and there, but why would I need to join a church? Why would I be part of one, like officially? What would you say to that? Why does the church need them, and why do they need the church?
Well, if they're a Christian, the church needs Christians in the body because the body has been gifted. Right. So every Christian needs to be part of it. The church, just so they bring the gifts that are meant for the health, the service, equipping of the church. So that's that's just a basic. If you're a Christian, you need to be a part of the church because that's what you've been called to do, you've been shaped to do, you've been gifted to do.
Right.
Other things are, it's important to align with a sound doctrine and accountability. Right. Those are the two things you're going to get in the life of the church as well. It's like, hey, does this church teach the right things? Do they teach them well? Those things are going to be important to, again, equipping you as a believer. And then there needs to be that sense of coming into church to say, hey, you're responsible for me, and I'm responsible for you. And the elders have a role in that, as well as every other member of the congregation, the brothers and sisters, to say, if you're a member here, we're going to want to know how you're doing, and we want to help you in that respect. And especially in this context where a lot of students in this town are going to a Christian college, they get a lot of great input with accountability and prayer groups and authorities like their professors. Really great, and it can actually work against the idea that I need to actually get that from a church.
Sure.
But as my previous pastor would say, if you're a Christian and you're not a member of the church, he said, I wonder why you're calling yourself a Christian, So he really had a really emphasis of like how important that is for you as a Christian at any stage. But again, as a college stage, you're out on your own, you're away from home for the first time, and you feel like, hey, I can kind of make my own decisions about what I do on Sundays, and I'm in a Christian college, so maybe that's not the biggest priority, but it's a huge priority. They really, One of the first things we taught in our college ministry in the fall was the life of the church, and really making this appeal to say, hey, you guys it's August, you just started school, but church is really crucial to your walk as a believer. So here's why. So.
My dad used to say, that Christ established He didn't establish a seminary or a university. He established a local church. And while those others are useful and good, but we never should get away from plan A, and make sure that that's the priority. And in fact, in my own life, I was one of those students. A lot of people, that are maybe newer to the church, I came in '98 to Forest as a college student, coming to Liberty, and just needed a church home. I didn't have my parents, didn't have people around me, and I found a church with older people and younger people, little kids, families, and I needed that. Yeah. I needed to be exposed to it as I prepared for marriage in the future, and so, I think what you're saying is so valuable. It's so important. So.
Yeah, and one other thing, I think that they also are important as a role model for those kids who are like teenage years.
Yeah.
Boy, if they see a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old who is committed to their church, who's faithful, that is really important. Again, they can look to their dad and other dads, but there's something about you get a young person who's going to be a model for some of those younger teens as well.
I think we also need their energy.
Energy, exactly.
So, good gracious, I talk to college students and they got a million ideas and things. It's like, it's exhausting at my age, it's just thinking about, but I love the fact that there's always, they're not easily discouraged. They're ready to go on to the next thing and do that. So, well, that's where you're serving at now. But as you take a step back, again, having been an elder, as someone that's just a Christian yourself, kind of observes, when you look at Christianity in general, the church in general, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges facing us today, things that we need to work on?
I think it's just sticking to the basics, playing the fundamentals, right? Like a sport. Knowing the Word, knowing it deeply, loving the Word, obedience, prayer, telling, loving the body, loving the world in the right way. Those are fundamentals. Those don't change from generation to generation.
Right.
The better the church does at just executing those and living those and passing them on to their children and families. I think the church stays healthy by, again, just staying inside of, I think, a pretty simple framework of what it means to know the Lord, love the Lord, walk with the Lord. One of my favorite movies is Remember the Titans with Denzel Washington.
Right.
There's a part in that movie where the old coaches are looking at his playbook. They're like, hey, Coach Boone, your playbook's kind of thin here. He says, I run, 5 plays. He said, it's like Novocaine. Give enough time, it's going to work. And I feel like that's really what the Christian life is like too. We got a playbook that doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, and sometimes church can try to make it that way. But it's essentially, again, the fundamentals, and with the Word as the foundation piece of that. I think that's going to make a healthy, lasting church, an impactful church. It's going to make Christianity both appealing and despised, which is what we're told that will happen.
Right.
So that's probably how I'd look at it.
But, that's good. Now, I know one of your just personal interests is church history. I know you've done a little teaching with the college students and so forth. So looking back in church history, who do you admire? Who stands out to you, and why?
I think this is hard because there's so many lives. But obviously Martin Luther for the kind of the punch he landed against salvation by works. That was the church turned just an important direction on his life and kind of just a dangerous challenge to the ruling church at the time. So it's a lot of credit to him. We owe him grace alone, faith alone, scriptures alone, Christ alone, the glory of God alone. Those are it's a huge contribution. I've become a recent fan of William Tyndale, the translator of the Bible to English, and his, again, that was a dangerous enterprise he undertook to to do that against threat,
Yeah.
against, so he's essentially in hiding for 12 years or so, I guess,
right,
is that right?
Right.
And I love the quote that says, so his nemesis trying to like track him down says, Tyndall is nowhere and he's everywhere.
Yeah, that's
I just love that. And I was like, okay, if Christianity has its superheroes, Luther is the Hulk, just pounding.
Yeah.
And Tyndall's Batman.
Yeah,
right? Just like he seems to like he takes down some criminals,
right.
but you just can't find. When you get there, he's gone. You
right.
know? So,
yeah.
But really love Tyndall. And then probably the last thing is just the Christians of Acts, the first Christians, Peter and Paul. There's that just so compelling. The Acts to me reads like a great novel. In a sense. So those are probably three good ones.
And I'm impressed you said Tyndall correctly.
Tyndall, yeah.
Most people say Tyndale, but
Tyndall,
it rhymes with spindle. I've always been told. So you are a big reader, and we and I have talked about books and different things. You're always making lists, things to read.
Yeah.
So outside of the Bible, what books maybe have shaped you the most over your life, or maybe even recently? Maybe what books?
Yeah. I'm a new Christian in the. I'm a growing Christian in the late 80s, early 90s, and I read Evidence That Demands a Verdict, both volume 1 and 2. Helped me with those categories of manuscripts, archaeology, prophecy, and then statistical probability. Like what are the chances of the prophecies just being good guesses? Tremendously important. I think after reading those books, I haven't had moments of like, doubting, is this really all real? And I mean, it just laid such a foundation of confidence and confidence of conviction. So a great set. I think Josh McDowell did a tremendous job with those. It's C.S. Lewis's books, Mere Christianity, and those are to be able to think in analogies and illustrations. Just really tremendously helpful as you're trying to understand Christian propositions in a way that just is so it makes it easy. I think
relatable. Everybody can
So other categories are just books that help with evangelism. I mean, I just feel like I just always need help with. How do you just talk to? Is the world changing? Are people less? Do they need a different starting point? Again, always with the gospel at the heart of it. I've read Mark Allen, Josh Chatraw's Apologetics at the Cross last year. I think that's my number one for apologetics related and equipping for evangelism type of books. So those are, and I maybe for fiction, I think Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis.
Right.
That's quite a again a revealing of what's sin like in the heart through a couple places. What are kind of what's the world saying that just sounds really foolish once you give them that rope to run with that. He does such a fabulous job of weaving those things together in a story, and then of course trying to get to the edge of where the sun rises, and that's kind of that's the country beyond our country, where what's kind of the heavenly realm. That's a fantastic book. I was surprised that it would impact me that much. Little thing like that. But
that's good. That's good. Well, obviously we're all in the middle of this unusual season right now with the virus and the quarantine and just the different things that we're working through. And so I'm curious for you, for Carol, for your family, like what is God teaching you, reminding you of? Like, how has He been, teaching you and growing you during this season?
Yeah, I think that I think the thing that just is blaring lights is how fragile our own plans really are, right? I mean, the world turned in a matter of days, it seemed like back in March. Just underscoring the admonition in James, like, hey, don't think tomorrow you're going to do this, or to say that, but to say, Lord willing, it may and it may not, and it may seem like the surest thing. And again, that's kind of where we were, again, just a month ago. So the fragility of our own plans, how the Lord can just turn all that in a second. And in a sense, there are a lot of people, and again, we've seen part of this as well, just seeing your kind of your material, or your confidence in material wealth, right? Mm-hmm. It's evaporating. It was evaporating fast. It's not, it's at least not gone to zero. At least so we're thankful for that. A lot of people losing income from their job and business situations. Again, that's the Lord has said, hey, I can essentially just blow, and it'll all be gone. I think He, by His grace, He may just have given us a taste of that without actually doing it all, right?
Right.
But certainly causing us to remember our confidence is in Him, right? And if we go to zero, He'll be there.
Right.
So He'll be present, and that's the confidence and the encouragement that we have in a time of maybe discouragement and losing hope, is that He's with us in, and He'll be with us, where it lands, and Lord willing, He'll be gracious to us as a world, as a nation, as His people. He's always faithful to His people for sure. To be with us through it, and never leave us. So,
Well, some trust in princes and some in chariots, but that's why we trust in the name of the Lord our God, because He will be faithful. He will be with us through the very end. Mark, thank you so much. It's great to get to know you a little bit more, and I know, church family, if you haven't already, you can continue to do that. We actually have a Get to Know Mark page that we had put up, kind of like a bulletin insert. So if you've not read that, we'll have the link on the website that you can see and read. And we will, like I said, this will come up on the agenda when we have our next members meeting. So stay tuned. We'll let you know what that is. But we look forward to meeting back together just as soon as we can. So again, Mark, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.